So thank you for coming out tonight to another meeting of the FSU Chapter of the International Association of Emergency Managers. Tonight we have an amazing, excellent speaker, amazing networking opportunity here tonight. We have the president of the Florida Emergency Preparedness Association, John Scott, and I will give a little bit of a bio about him. He's a native of Florida and Brevard County. He rejoined Brevard County's Emergency Management Department in 2016, and he holds the designation of Florida Professional Emergency Manager from the Florida Emergency Preparedness Association, also known as FEPA. Mr. Scott has responded to floods, wildfires, the Haiti earthquake, Deepwater Horizon oil spill, radiological space launches, and countless space tropical storms and hurricanes. Previously, Mr. Scott worked for Monroe County Emergency Management as the senior planner, Brevard County Emergency Management as the Homeland Security Coordinator, and the Florida Division of Emergency Management as the Region 7 Coordinator. In January of 2021, Mr. Scott was named Director for Brevard County Emergency Management and is currently leading the EOC Team through the COVID-19 response, which is the longest activation in the county's history. He also serves, quite obviously, as the president of the Florida Emergency Preparedness Association. And so we're so privileged to have him here with us tonight. He's going to speak on his career journey, on FEPA, on why it's valuable for students and aspiring and current EM professionals to get involved in FEPA, and a lot of great insight. And so I thank you, John, for being here tonight, and I pass the floor over to you.
Oh, well, thank you. How's everyone tonight? Good, thumbs up. We'll do
Doing
that.
quite well. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. So thanks for the introduction and thanks for the invitation to speak. I'm a pretty casual guy, so we'll try to keep it loose tonight and see where you guys want to go. I'm happy to answer questions. How many folks are familiar with with FEPA and our association? Just hands. Cool. Then I won't.
I've heard of you guys.
Well, thank you. So we've been around since the 60s. So we're a pretty old association by emergency management standards. We have about 800 members strong throughout the state. We're very Florida focused. As you guys know, you guys are the international side of the house. And we tend to stay very Florida focused. We have members from both county government, city government, a lot of private nonprofit folks, and increasingly the private sector as emergency management broadens to be a more whole community reflective approach. We do a lot of different things. You know, you guys you highlighted the certifications we offer, similar to what IAEM does. We have certifications. We have a lot of working groups. We have a lot of committees that we structure ourselves differently than you all. One of the changes we've made in the last couple of years is we've really evolved to be more product focused, sort of a best practice focused kind of thing. And to facilitate that, what we've done is we set up working groups to tackle certain problems. So like I am the chair of the mass care group. So we spend a lot of time working on sheltering, working on community feeding, and we identify, one or two large scale problems and then try to figure out how we can leverage what we're doing across the community of emergency managers to sort of one problem to fix a bunch of things. So I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. So one of the things in the last 5 years the mass care working group has been focused on has been shelter staffing specifically. As we have seen a trend across the state, and it's across the country, but across the state specifically, where the Red Cross is no longer really able to staff and manage our shelters, especially our hurricane shelters. And that responsibility increasingly falls on county and city governments, but also puts a larger strain on private nonprofit partners to, maybe they were a support agency before, now they're thrust into a larger role. So in the mass care working group in the last 5 years, we've really identified those issues, worked through best practices. And then right before COVID, we actually debuted a mass care working group developed shelter training course curriculum. We trained instructors so that they could bring it back to their areas. It's a curriculum that anyone can have who teaches the class who's been approved by the mass care working group. And the theory was prior to COVID that we would actually start to teach those courses regionally and do it in two ways. One, actually teach it for those folks who are going to work shelters, but also to teach instructors to teach the class so that we continue to sort of spread that out. And we're doing that across the sectors. That's just the one that I'm most involved with as the mass care chair, but we have higher ed working group that focuses on issues in higher education, both from the academic side and from the higher ed side, who are, the actual emergency management programs for institutions and what they work through. We've developed a mentoring program, which we're very proud of, which is about a 12-month program, 9-month program, where we actually pair people up. You can be a student, you can be new to the field, you can be someone who's been in the field for 25 years and you're looking to get better in one area, and we pair you up through a pretty extensive vetting process with someone who's going to be able to help you grow in a specific area. And there's plans you develop, and then you work on those throughout the year. And obviously, like everyone, that a lot of those efforts lost some steam and momentum coming out of COVID. We have a wide ranging groups. We have Web EOC and technology are large platforms we use. We use Everbridge in the state of Florida. So we have groups that are working specifically on increasing people's usability and increasing the customer experience for those kinds of things. And it's about growing who we are as a Florida emergency management community. And that's really where our focus was headed pre-COVID. One of the things that we were tackling on, or starting to tackle before COVID, was the idea in the training world of, there's a lot of, I assume you guys are familiar with ICS courses and those kinds of things. And if, by the way, if I say some stuff that you have no idea what I'm talking about, just wave me down and I'll explain. But there's a real shift conversation coming between whether or not we should just be doing ICS courses and that's the primary curriculum and training we should be doing, or what are the other professional development courses that we should be looking at. So ICS is great for responders and chain of command, but it is really phase centric and doesn't necessarily do what we do all the time. We're planners. Outside of COVID, rarely is our EOC activated for long periods of time. Brevard is the most active EOC in the state, and we're the second most activated EOC in the country, primarily because we support space launches and those kinds of things. But even then, that's 50, 60 days a year. Most of the time that we spend, as you all know, and as you're learning, as emergency management professionals, we spend in the planning cycle of things, and the training cycle of things, and the exercising cycle of things, and building relationships. And so, how do we build those soft skills was really what we were looking at. And how do we also build training that's less, 4 days of sitting in a class and you talk about stuff and then you do a breakout and then you come back and talk about it. And how do we make it more practitioner driven? So here's 3 hours of mitigation, and we're going to focus on how to write an HMGP or hazard grant mitigation project application. And what do you do in it to make it successful so that you actually put yourself in a position to get the award? Like, when you're writing a project worksheet for a recovery, like, do we understand what that needs to be? And do we understand what the narrative and how we tell the story beyond just the, I need to replace a road because it's damaged. Like, why do I need to replace a road? Why do I need to go to a better standard? And what is that going to do for me from not just a, repair standpoint, but a resiliency standpoint, so that we're not fixing this same road the next time it floods or the next time we have a hurricane. So that got paused and interrupted by COVID. And so we'll start to pick that up here, I hope, in the next couple of months. We have 2 large gatherings every year. We have our annual conference, which is usually in late January or early February of every year. And then we have our mid-year work session, which is usually in late July or the first week of August. And this year we are at Crystal River the first week of August. And usually in mid-year, we focus on a lot about what the association's business is, where we want to go. An annual is more of what would be described as a more traditional conference, where there's sessions and education and training that's happening on a broader scope or a topic specific. This year, because of COVID, and this will be the first time as an emergency management community in Florida, we've had a chance to really get together in person. We're going to do a little bit different. And we're really going to, we're at a point professionally where COVID did a lot of different things to impact all aspects of our business. And it's a good opportunity sort of to collectively get together, to take a deep breath and say, okay, what have those impacts been? What are we going to take from that going forward? What do we like? What was awful and we never want to do again, which BT dubs is vaccinations. It's terrible. And then where do we want to go as a professional community? And you sort of use this as a reset point to make sure our priorities not only reflect the will of the community, but reflect the reality that we're going to live in a post-COVID world. One of the things that I'll highlight, I think that's for me the strongest point of our association. And if you're not a member, I certainly encourage you to join. I wouldn't be doing my job as president if I didn't say visit FEPA.org, check us out, join. We're fine, nice people. But we really are driven by the community. When we identify a problem, we're driven to fix that problem, and we are driven to involve people who are passionate about those things. That's why we went to the working group model, because it connects people with something they're passionate about and then allows us to solve a problem, or at least address a problem that community-wide we're facing. So it's a very hands-on association, and it's a very interactive one, but it's also what you make of it. If you're someone who's sitting on the sidelines and waiting for folks to come to you, we do our best to get to you. But if you raise your hand and say, hey, I love healthcare plan reviews, we've got a working group that's working on those kinds of things and that's developing new things. And you say, hey, I don't really know what I like, but I love doing PowerPoints and doing data. Well, we'll find places to put you in, and we'll get data that's running through, and then you can help us sift that, get that back to the community, and then give us some data that we can make a data-driven decision on how we want to address stuff. So it really is, it's a very close community, but it's also kind of a group that if you've got some momentum in it and you've got some interest, we let people who are passionate really follow that passion. That's how I got involved. I just raised my hand and said, hey, here are some things I'd like to do. Here are some stuff I want to help with. And then over time, we just suck you in deeper and deeper. And then you become, all kinds of fun things, committee chairs and board members. And, you just give up all your free time and fun time for those things. But it's super rewarding. And I think that's one of the stronger things. We talk a lot about, and I'm sure you all are varying levels of your careers as you go through this, but emergency management really is it's a people business, and it's a relationship-driven industry. Rarely do we own all of the resources necessary to do whatever response it is. I'm a director in Brevard County. I have no fire trucks. I have no cops. I have no front-end loaders. I've got 3 SUVs and a bunch of computers. That's helpful for my EOC. That is not helpful for a disaster. So anything that we're responding to, I'm really going to lean on other agencies to provide the resources and the assets. And sure, during a disaster, I have the statutory authority to tell them what to do. But if you think I get to tell a cop or a sheriff what to do, you're out of your mind. It is about that relationship I have with that cop or that sheriff or that fireman or the public works director or my planning and zoning director, who's going to keep sending me people to write my sit reps and my flash reports, even though his folks are already exhausted. Like, you need people to believe in you, and you have to believe in them, and you have to trust them. And I think that is sort of where we excel at FEPA from an organizational standpoint, is we really are, we're a close group. We know each other. We've known each other a long time. We're welcoming, so that, as every day, people say, hey, I want to get involved and I like this. And we connect you to those kinds of people. And then you find your little niche in our association, and then it expands. So there's a lot of different ways to get involved, But at the end of the day, we're an association that's as strong as our membership, and we're in a business that's as strong as our relationships. So it's about getting to those kinds of things. I'm going to pause there, and you guys have questions about anything I'm saying so far?
So you said that you don't have any trucks and things like that. So you subcontract is what you do, right?
No, so what I do is I call the fire chief and say, hey, I need 6 of your fire trucks to go. Actually, what I say is, hey, I have this problem. You guys are supposed to be the ones who know how to solve this. Please go do that.
Gotcha.
Or I've got a roadway that's blocked, and I know, I call my public works director and say, I need you to get a crew out there and fix this. So what we are in emergency managers, we're not the people who fix stuff. We're the people who know the guy and the gal who fix stuff.
Yeah.
I'm the kind of guy who, if you see my telephone number on your phone at 3 o'clock in the morning, you may not like it, but you're going to answer.
Yes, sir.
So, and I don't have to pay anybody any money for that. That's someone else's job. Other questions you guys have?
Yeah, you feel free to unmute yourselves or put anything in the chat. Don't be shy.
Yes. And Chelsea, thanks for joining. We're excited to have you.
Yeah, so I actually work for the third largest healthcare system in South Dakota. Sorry, my son is around as well, but trying to switch from the healthcare side of things to the public sector, and looking to potentially move down to Florida, just kind of see what the culture is like and trying to get a feel for things. So I think this is great to hear you speak about your experiences in Brevard County. I actually have family down there, so I used to think that they were crazy for staying through the hurricanes and whatnot, but I totally understand at this point. So I'm just looking forward to hearing and having the experience of networking and being able to learn everything that I can. I've been in the field for 3 years at this point, building an emergency preparedness program for 6 different hospitals and 25 different clinics or so, but that's way different than the public sector, of course. So yeah, just happy to be here.
But I want to turn now.
Good. And obviously you're practicing multitasking right now, so good for you. I'm not sure how I could juggle all that. But yeah, I think we talk about our culture in Florida, and obviously I'm biased as a native, and this is mostly what I've known. I've done some stuff outside of the state just on mutual aid. But I do think we have a very close program, and we're a very involved program. You mentioned hurricanes, and those are obviously what we get famous for, but we have wildfire season. We rain all the time. It's Florida. The weather is always chaotic. And that's before you get into our crazy population and whatever it is they like to give us the next day. So we get to be very, very busy. We get to be fairly diverse, so it helps. And what we've also, continued to prove to each other, and, there's only a handful of, even at 800 members, there's only a handful of us that do this. 800 is not a big number when you look at how many firefighters or cops are in our state of, we're what, 23 million people these days. So when we know that when we get hit, we're going to need each other's help. And that's a huge part of what we do in the association. It's seeing a friendly face at your worst time. We deployed after Hurricane Michael, which fortunately spared us and ripped the panhandle apart. We deployed up there and were first faces on the ground. And the majority of people we saw, we knew from somewhere else. In fact, the team that I went on was requested specifically because that's one of the things that we do in FEPA is we manage the mutual aid EOC teams. And it's not an incident management team, it's an EOC support team where you're getting someone who's not going to go in and be an ops chief or a recovery person. You can ask for that if you need it, but mostly EOC and emergency management teams are jacks of all trades and masters of none. And we can drop in and, maybe you need to do, you're going to start in logistics, but very quickly you're going to find that, well, logistics is covered, but I got to go over there and start writing plans because our planning products are terrible and we have to fix that. Or, no one knows how to talk to the media or they're overwhelmed. So that's what I'm doing now. And that's how I'm going to help this community recover and stabilize, is just jumping in and fixing those things. And so much of that happens, again, I'll just keep plugging FEPA because it's, what I get elected to do. But I also believe in it. Those people I drop in, those are people I've seen before. Those are people who know me. And if you don't know me, you know somebody who knows me and will vouch for me, and vice versa. When I get hit in the face here, and eventually it will be our turn, I'm going to want people who I know can do the job and can come in at my worst day and put me on a path to my best day. And, that kind of camaraderie, that kind of connection, we talk about it as FEPA family. That is an important connection for us, that we have that kind of faith in each other. And that really is, again, really is about growing who you know and where, and it starts with identifying what you're passionate about and then working out from there. What else can I talk to you guys about?
I'm curious. So you were first elected, was it the Daytona Beach conference in early 2020?
So I'm in my second term. So yeah, Daytona Beach would be my first. Yeah, that was my first one.
Yeah. Because that was the first FEPA conference I went to. I was able to go on scholarship through FSU's EMHS program, as well as our vice president, Lucian Conti. He couldn't be here tonight. He had to fly on a plane. And our treasurer, James Reisner, he also went to the conference, couldn't be here tonight, family obligations. And also Ben Redifer, another student at FSU, he was there as well. And we were there with Professor Rob McDaniel, and it was a great experience. Professor McDaniel really just, gave us a great heads up, a great insight into like how tight knit the community is in Florida in EM, and the role of FEPA and the importance of making connections in that community. But yeah, I remember that conference was like right before the virus stuff really started in the US. So another question I had kind of related to that was, were you all, because I remember like in early 2020, people were definitely monitoring, stuff with coronavirus over like in China and other parts of the world. Were you all like on the FEPA board, like in the overall, like really in the EM Florida community, those of you who are really in the know with that stuff, were you all expecting back then in early February of 2020 for the coronavirus thing to have as much like impact on American society as it did, or did that even kind of catch you by surprise?
I think the scope caught everybody by surprise. Like you know the phrase global pandemic, you write it in your pandemic plans, you know what the cascading consequences look like, but to live it, experience it, I don't think that anything does it justice. But to directly answer, so I'll speak from a Brevard standpoint. So the week before, we went to the conference on a Monday. The Friday before, we actually sent out our first flash report on COVID. And flash report for us is sort of a precursor to more advanced planning products that we do, like situation reports. And it just tells our partners like, hey, there's something out there you want to monitor. We're monitoring it. You're going to want to do the same. And that's pretty much all it was. It was just, hey, there's this thing. We don't know what it is. Nobody really does. It's worth monitoring. And then when we got back, we started to pick that up a little bit. I think we had our first actual partner meeting maybe a week and a half after we got back. No, a week after we got back from annual. And then I think the next week we activated and have stayed activated ever since. So we're at like 460 days, I think. So yeah, we see those kinds of things coming. There's a lot with COVID we didn't see coming. And then from a board perspective, it's a tough challenge to sort of navigate a year where we're used to that close connection, which is a lot of in-person driven kind of stuff. Sure, we talk, we pick up the phones, but much like other folks, virtual was the secondary option for stuff. We all preferred in-person, face-to-face kind of stuff, and we had to rapidly switch from that. And what's also tough is, we have so many of our members, and COVID was so inclusive, whether you were a private sector vendor who supports emergency management, whether you were a nonprofit, whether you were a city, a county, whatever your angle was, you were caught up in COVID. And again, we're an association that relies on volunteer time. All of the great work I highlighted in the beginning is driven by people sacrificing nights and weekends to help us address a problem. And so when those people are working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with no breaks, you know, as a board, we recognized early that it would be ludicrous to try to accomplish the same sort of timelines that we wanted to accomplish. Like, when I was a president and I sort of got up my first thing and said, I'm gonna make it a goal to call every member and say hello. I got through about 11 members, and then like that ship sailed, and we were all back on, our regular jobs and focusing on those kinds of things. And that's the challenge that any volunteer organization faces. I talked about the Red Cross and their shifting capabilities, but a lot of that is just driven by the fact that they don't have the volunteer numbers they used to have. So, where do you get that time? And if you have to compete with resources for limited volunteer hours, your organization's capabilities are going to suffer. And that's what we saw. A lot of the progress that we wanted to make didn't happen. And that's okay. Like I said, that's why you'll see us use mid-year as a chance to reset and refocus on where we want to go. But that's always going to be the challenge in these kinds of things, because all progress really comes out of people giving extra time. There's never enough time in the day to do your regular jobs, to do family stuff, to have any sort of life or fun, and move forward. You can do a great job for your employer. You can do a great job for your family, but you're probably not going to have the extra hours and time to do that kind of, to give back elsewhere. Or maybe you already give back through a different kind of volunteer organization or volunteer activity. So it's difficult to do, and making sure we're providing venues and forums for people who are interested in that kind of stuff to connect and to move us forward is important. It's also important to celebrate those people who do.
Yeah, I remember you were all trying to have some conferences, over the past year here and there, but then you ended up like canceling them because people just weren't available and you didn't feel like it was safe and stuff.
Yeah, so we tried to do our mid-year. We were going to do our mid-year virtually. And again, we talk about what emergency managers are. We are nothing if not pragmatic and flexible. So very clear, by midsummer, it was clear we weren't going to be able to meet in person for mid-year, which would have been our next opportunity. And they canceled Governor's Hurricane Conference. And the original plan was, we'll just do these breakout sessions. We'll do it virtually. It'll be 5 days. And then we started to see spikes in COVID cases, and people who had a little bit of time, who had gotten to see a little bit of a break, began to lose that break. And very, very, very quickly, our ambitious goal of 5 days a week went away to just basically a morning session where we get to have a couple of speakers. We got to talk a little bit about, association business, but, then it was back to work for everybody. And a similar thing repeated in annual. We were optimistic in the winter that we were going to maybe get a little bit of a break, that things were loosening up a little bit. We were sort of in between, testing and vaccines and when they would come out and what that would look like. And then as soon as vaccines started to roll out, which was about a month before, about 3 weeks before it was time for us to meet, like we began to see a little bit earlier that, this was going to be an all-encompassing thing, and we just weren't going to be able to pull it off. So we just did a regular business meeting, which we're required to do, and then let people go to work. So, it is a hallmark of what we are as emergency managers, which is, we're problem solvers, and we're going to figure things out. But all of it, and I think one of the things I'm proudest of from an association standpoint is, while we have an executive board and a board of directors, none of those decisions were made just amongst those people. Like, we always went back out to membership and said, here's what we're thinking. Tell us what you're thinking. And it provided opportunities, and not everyone took them, but it provided opportunities to get feedback straight from our membership, because that is in line, you know, with what our general focus is, which is we will continue to be driven by membership. And that's just a hallmark of what we think we do and who we think we are.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's very important to listen to the membership, listen to the practitioners, you know, on the ground, and exchange, yeah, best practices and all those sorts of things. Communication is so important. So, what is if anyone has anything they would like to ask, I have a few more questions, but I don't want to take up the whole floor. If anyone would like to ask anything, feel free to unmute yourself or put anything in the chat. Don't be shy.
So I'll ask a question.
Sure, yeah.
And you guys can tell me how many folks are currently employed in EM and how many folks are trying to get into EM?
I mean, I'm currently employed. I know Alex Griffin's currently employed. Anyone
Yep,
else?
with Haggerty.
I'm kind of mixed between safety and healthcare, of course, safety services and emergency management up here in South Dakota.
Okay, I've seen a couple folks in the chat as well. Okay.
I just got an internship recently.
Who's your internship with?
Ashbrit.
Okay. All right. Well, it just helps me sort of figure out where everyone is sort of going as they move forward with their next steps. You know, it can be a difficult field to get into because it is such a small community. But I think, and an internship it's a great way to go to get involved. Most of the folks that I know who got into it and have been successful in it have been, especially when you talk about it from a county and a city government perspective, have been, their entry point has been an internship. That's what it was for me. That's what it was for 3/4 of my staff. Whether that was, you know, with only a couple of exceptions, was it actually Brevard? We brought some folks in who came in elsewhere, but an internship is a good way to get in. It's a good way to get ahead through as you go through. And you answer the question that I imagine a lot of you face, which is there's a difference between education and experience. A lot of times, if you have the education, people want you to have the experience, and then vice versa. So where do you find that balance? An internship is a really good way to do that, and a really successful way for a lot of folks to get in the door. So food for thought for you guys who are considering breaking in, and those who are on the private side, like that's also an excellent way to get in. You'll make contacts, you'll figure out where you guys want to go. And given the complexity of the work right now, you guys should have some fun.
Yeah, I know that some people involved with our chapter have gotten internships through like a speaker who came. We had the CEO of Ashbrit Environmental, Brittany Perkins Castillo. She spoke to our chapter back in like December, and you know, she basically let us know they were looking for interns. So we passed info on to our email list, and Fabian, you know, got involved with them, and also a girl named Adriana, who's not here right now. She also found out about that opportunity through, you know, that meeting basically. And so I also, to plug this, I know FSU EMHS, they have the Pathways program, which basically what they do is they put you through a 1 credit hour professional development class. And then after you complete that, they will place you into an internship with, you know, the various connections they have. Like I did Pathways last summer, and I was able to do a remote internship with the Florida Division of Emergency Management the following fall. As a result of the Pathways placement. So those of you who haven't done Pathways, we'll email that info out so you can look into that, because that's a great way to get an internship.
Yeah, and just another quick plug with Pathways. I know Peyton Parkin, who's a part of our chapter, is now the Haggerty Southeast Recovery Team's newest intern. So Haggerty is now also looking for interns through FSU. So definitely take advantage of that program if you have not already.
Yeah, definitely. John, I'm curious about the mid-year conference, the upcoming mid-year conference in Crystal River, August 4th through 6th. Tell us a little bit about that. What are going to be some of the like main themes, breakout sessions? Who are going to be some of the big speakers? What's that going to look like?
Yeah, so as I touched on, we're going to use mid-year as an opportunity a little different this year. So mid-year, like typically we would have breakout sessions. We would work on committee and working group business because mid-year is typically very business of the association focused. But this year, given all that we've done and been through as a community and a profession the last year and a half, we're actually not going to do any breakout rooms. We're going to keep everybody together in one big room and run what we're calling a series of town hall discussions. So there'll be facilitated discussions on everything from statutory impacts from COVID to training, where we want to go, where we are now, where we want to go in the future, what our roles are, how emergency decision-making was affected, what we think emergency decision-making looks like in the future. All of those kinds of things we're going to try to collectively discuss. And then sort of from that, use that as the strategic footprint to, okay, so these 5 things are what we agree are our core issues for the next 2 years. What are the goals, objectives, and tasks necessary to address and resolve those? And then identify that as a community and really use that as the launching point, excuse me, for the next couple years of association business, if we're successful at doing this. Again, because we are so collaborative as a community, if you go into breakout rooms, you're going to lose some thoughts. You're going to have people that are talking about similar things. You're going to have people sharing best practices, and we're going to have people siloed, and those stuff's not going to hear. And then what we want to avoid is the idea that people are just going to, we're going to talk about the problems, but we're not going to put ourselves on a path to addressing the problems. So rather than spend 3 days of people talking at each other, we'd like to spend 3 days of people talking with each other. So that's the theory. We'll see how it works. We've never done this style before.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely aiming to be there. Excited for the first in-person conference since the Daytona Beach one right before the virus stuff started. Definitely encourage everyone here in the meeting to attend that conference. It's going to be such a great gateway into Florida EM networking, and you'll hear about so many opportunities and meet so many seasoned people in the field. It's just like such an excellent opportunity. I mean, when I went to Daytona Beach conference, I got to meet Brock Long, former FEMA administrator, and that played a huge role in getting him to speak to our chapter back in fall, and met a number of other professionals in the field who ended up speaking to our chapter at various meetings. And so it was excellent for finding a lot of seasoned professionals for that. So really recommend you guys all check it out, and we'll send out some more info about that.
Yeah. So do you guys have non-FEPA questions for me? Something I can answer for folks as they're trying to figure out their pathways?
Yeah, you guys want to ask general EM questions or career questions, go for it.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm happy to continue to talk about FEPA all day. Like, I'm a fan.
Well, sure. I'll start out with one. So I usually like asking the question to our speakers. Basically, what was the most strikingly impactful or memorable disaster you ever responded to? What were some of the big takeaways, big insights that really shaped a lot of your career expertise?
So before COVID, I would have said the worst disaster I ever responded to was Deepwater Horizon. Not from a calamity standpoint, just toughest to work because it was so political, because it was so expansive. And so like with a hurricane, folks, for the most part, play inside the lines. Everyone kind of knows how we're going to do this. The storm is coming. At some point, we're going to issue the areas that are impacted are going to issue evacuation orders. There's going to be sheltering. There's a general sense to things. I worked the Haiti earthquake, which was before Deepwater, the worst one I worked. And basically, anytime you get to a place where people take a plan, take a concept, throw it right out the window, pay no attention to how we would normally do business, how we've trained on business, how our partners are ready to work, and just start making stuff up. And oftentimes it's with the good intentions of, hey, I've got to solve this, and I didn't really think about this, so I'm just going to do this. But a lot of people moving faster than their brains, and a lot of people moving before thinking, which is what we saw with certainly with Deepwater, because it was so odd, because it was so scary, because it was so not just environmentally devastating, but economically devastating for lots of industry. That was the single worst thing I'd worked until COVID, and COVID is absolutely the worst disaster I've ever worked, because it's been multi-phased. You talk about the size and scope of what this was, and the worst part of COVID has been the vaccination efforts. That has been not a pleasant experience, because we are in the resource scarcity business. We always are. That's when we drop in. We're not handing out water in a community where Publix is and stuff like that are open post-storm because you can go get it. We'll identify people who've been impacted and no longer have the means to do that and specifically assist them. But gone are the days of us just opening up a parking lot and water and food to anyone who drives through. We're going to have to be in communities that really show the impact. And those are long lessons learned to get us to a smarter recovery place. The vaccine was a kind of scarce resource where, you have large groups of people who wanted the vaccine and would do anything for it. And we're getting a couple hundred a week to start with. And, so for Brevard, we have about 250,000 people over the age of 65. And for the first couple months of the vaccination, or really for the first 6 weeks, we were topping out at about 1,600 vaccines a week. That is an unmanageable equation. We are very much upside down in the supply-demand equation, and it caused our public and our leaders who responded to the public pressure to act very rashly. And they wanted a lot of things in place that didn't necessarily make a lot of sense and were hard to execute. And again, you're not going to please everyone. When we can give 1,000 vaccines in 5-day period, and we had on average, once we would make a vaccine week available, it would sell out, for lack of a better term, in under 3 minutes. And you have people who can't even click on a link fast enough to sign up for something, and every opportunity they have is gone. And getting them to understand that I realize you think you should have been able to get it, but there's no way. When our Department of Health opened they started with a phone line. When they opened the phone lines, they got 170,000 calls. They normally average about 200 calls a day. So those numbers aren't sustainable. Literally broke their phone system. Their phone system didn't recover for a week. And we had servers with issues. We had calls from Verizon and AT&T about the fact that we were overwhelming cell towers, because people were using auto dialers just to keep calling until they got through. It was nuts. So hard pass on doing that again.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it was not easy by any stretch of the imagination. Would anyone else like to ask anything? Open floor, don't be shy.
I have a quick question. My family is originally from Melbourne Beach, so very familiar with Brevard. And I spent a little bit of time there around Christmas. I was there on and off for about 2 months. And just kind of from being there during that transition period when people were starting to relax a little bit, I was seeing a lot of people relax to a degree that I live in South Florida, grew up there, but my extended family's from Brevard. They were relaxing to a degree that was unfamiliar to me, I guess would be the best way to describe it, being in both Tallahassee and South Florida. How, from a public information standpoint, were you able to manage kind of the public health measures that you guys implemented, but also keeping the public engaged?
So I'm going to answer what I think your first question is, and then I'll answer, I'm going to answer what I think the theme of your question is, and then I'll get into the specifics. So how do we get people to take it serious who weren't, and who were sort of maybe taking their foot off the gas? The short answer is persistence, but also understanding that we're not going to, like, one of the things that made COVID very different is it weaponized and politicized public health and public safety to a degree that we haven't seen in a very long time. So it made communicating that message very different, because anytime we posted something, you were going to start Facebook, Twitter, whatever, you were going to start a beef. And that was just something that we learned to accept and to get through. You know, we did early in the mask game, right? The should you mask, should you not conversation. We did a masked, what we called a masked warrior. Was it masked warrior? I'm actually blanking out what it was, but basically a campaign where we asked people to take a picture of themselves in a mask who wanted to, and just tell us why they wore the mask. You know, some people will say I wore a mask for my safety because I'm a cancer survivor. Some people would say I wear a mask because, you know, I want to be able to see my parents and their elder, you know, for all of whatever your personal story is. And it very quickly became a hot button issue where people were wanting to know why we were taking sides, and all. It got away from us. It was still a really good campaign. I'm glad we did it. But it was also really an eye-opening point that came back around for vaccinations to remind us, you know, that people are going to answer shop. And we see this in hurricanes. You know, we tell people to evacuate. You know, they live in Melbourne Beach. They live where I live in Satellite Beach. You know, they're in harm's way. And that's okay, but they're going to go find the one spaghetti model that spins it out to the ocean, or the one spaghetti model that moves it through South Florida and doesn't touch us. You know, that's what they're going to do, and they're going to answer shop. So there's a piece of that where you just have to sort of figure out and accept that you're not going to change those minds. And the campaign, by the way, was called the Mask Crusader. So, but that's just a part of it. Like, but it doesn't mean you get to retreat. It doesn't mean you get to go away from what the facts are. And you're just going to pick facts, and you're going to let people go out there and make up their own decisions, and encourage them to say, hey, here's where you go to get trusted information. You read it, you figure out what's best for you and your family. And you do that enough, they get that, you know, you're not being partisan, or you're not playing whatever side and agenda they want to give to you. You'll get more people than you'll lose. And then there's just a lot of taking our, you know, talking to our public information folks and those people on social media, and making sure that they stay sane, because it is a lot of vitriol to read. So I don't know if that covered everything, but that's what we did.
Yeah, thank you. That was a great answer.
Thanks.
Would anyone else like to ask anything about EM in general, career, FEPA, and anything? Don't feel like it's ever too specific or too random.
I'm super knowledgeable, so don't hesitate to give me weird stuff.
I've got one more question for you, sir.
What's up, bro?
I've been researching into the importance of communication within emergency management, and I was kind of curious as to how COVID, considering how it disconnected people in such a great manner across the country. And I was curious as to how communication has evolved throughout the pandemic and how it's affected emergency management or FEPA as a whole.
So just so I can answer your question correctly, when you say communication, you're referring to the actual physical tools like telephones, radios, computers, that kind of stuff, or are you referring to the actual dialogue that occurs?
I was more so just saying, like, outreaching to, what's the word here? Oh, outreaching to people and getting necessary information. Because I know you spoke earlier about how your phone lines were being overloaded. And so in such a case, how would you get the knowledge out to these people that were, you know, having these problems?
Yeah. So again, we talk about public messaging and communicating out what it is we're trying to do. It's difficult because, you know, we communicate in about 11 different platforms. We have all of the social media. So that's Facebook. And I'm going to talk specifically about Brevard here. So we're Facebook, we're Twitter, we're Instagram. We're also, we have a website. We also do text alerts. We also send out information to the media, both traditional and print media. So that's TV stations as well. We do radio interviews. We have a whole team of people who are communicating in any kind of platform we can find. And when someone says, hey, this is where I get my news, we then figure out a way to communicate in that platform. And what's challenging and difficult is, as people get increasingly more cellular, they also want the communication to come to them personally. So before, it used to be enough, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, to get it on the news. So if we can get it on the news, we could reach a lot of people. If we could get it on the newspaper, we could reach a whole bunch more people. And then social media was like the third piece of that sort of triangle where, hey, this is where we're closing the loop. Increasingly, it's not enough to do those things. You have to figure out a way to put it on that person's device, and at a time when they're ready for it. So again, I talked about we have a texting service through Everbridge, which is a state contract. We send out a whole bunch of information. We used it to announce things like vaccine availability and those kinds of things. And it's really challenging because once you even get people to that point where they actually know, okay, I can get this alert straight to my phone. Well, then we were getting feedback. Well, none of those vaccine locations are in my neighborhood. Well, of course they're not in your neighborhood. Like, we don't have if we had them in your neighborhood, we wouldn't need to tell you they were available in a limited quantity because they'd be widely available. It is the challenge that we're going to face as we go forward when we're dealing with communicating with the general public at large, because while people tend to think of us as more of a globalist society, and we're more aware of what's happening around the globe, we are increasingly more individualized and silo in how we get our communication. So if we're on Facebook and we're not in one of your streams, or if we're talking to media partners and we happen to only talk to CNN, and if we're not able to get through to Fox or MSNBC, then we're missing two segments of the population who never turn from those things. And increasingly more people are watching national news than they are local news, as we continue to be a little bit more partisan in how we consume our news. So, it is difficult. How COVID has changed it is it's given us more tools. It's given us opportunities to really test different ways to reach people. This is less about a tool issue and less about a message issue and more about a cultural issue, and figuring out how we get to people when they're only looking at this screen and only looking at what they find to support their interests, whether that be politically, socially, or recreationally.
Do you expect these changes to persist in a post-COVID world, or you think people are going to slowly fade back into how it was?
No, I think it's going to stay the same. I think it's going to continue to get more individually focused, because again, I can't tell you how many residents I spoke to during COVID, and even in the last, we had a couple of storms come through that looked like they were going to threaten us, who said, I don't know where to go to get information. And I sent them a link to 12 places, all saying the same thing. And they said, well, this doesn't tell me what I'm looking for. Like, well, I don't know what to do for you then. So in the same way that we can't just give up because they don't like the message we're giving, we can't give up on trying to find new ways. And what it means is we have to spend more time engaging the public, and not just speaking at the public, but actually getting out into the public and talking with them at, community forums and saying, okay, tell me where you go to get news. It's one of the changes we made during COVID was, okay, you say we're not telling you where anything, tell us where you consume your news and we'll figure out a way to get there. And what we found was a lot of times we were in where they consumed their news, just not when they were consuming it. So if we didn't happen to time it where a story was on when they looked at their Facebook feed, in their minds we're not communicating. In our minds, we're it's hard to hit you every single time you turn on your phone. So it's just going to be a challenge going forward.
Thank you.
You're welcome, man.
Yeah, I saw that we got a question in the chat earlier, which I should have made a point to bring that up earlier. Ashley asked, any tips on networking or building connections in the field? Gee, I wonder if FEPA has anything to do with that.
Yeah. So I would say the biggest tip I can do is tell you to get involved, whether that's through FEPA or whether that's just locally with a group that is involved, like, a nonprofit. If you are somewhere and you're interested in, you're not already employed in emergency management, you want to get in, reach out to your local city. A little harder for cities. All counties in Florida have an emergency management program. But just get involved, like get in and don't be shy about it. Internship programs are a great way to get in from a county side, from a city side. But Red Cross, Salvation Army, Habitat for Humanity, lots of 211 lines, like your disaster community line or your community service line is, they're tied in with the Emergency Operations Center. Those things are all great ways to get involved. Make yourself known. That's, just reach out to people. It can be a little scary, but it's like making friends on the first day of school, right? Like someone's got to step out there. And one friend leads to another friend, leads to another friend. And before you know it, you've got a squad. So that's just kind of how it works. Obviously, I'll put in the plug that, working through the association is an easy way to do that. Getting a member, getting into a working group or a committee, becoming involved with that committee, coming to conferences, all of those things are going to widen your expanse. And it is, again, I keep saying it's a group that's a very tight group that we spend a lot of time talking to one another. I mean, the majority of the time after the conference is over, people go out to dinner with each other, they come back, they hang around the hotel and they just sit out and talk and, engage in fellowship. Sometimes with a drink. Oftentimes with a drink. Whether that drink is adult or not is your call. But that I learned the most stuff in my career after conferences or after trainings in those kinds of environments, hearing from people who are the actual practitioners who are talking about real problems and real solutions. So don't be shy, put yourself in that arena.
Mr. Scott, I have a question. Do you suggest any books for leadership that we can read on? I feel like, especially when we're going to be stepping into roles that are probably going to reach the level of managerial position, I just wanted to know if you have any books that you've read to know how to guide yourself in that space.
So leadership's a tricky thing. There's a lot of books out there for people who are into those kinds of things, like, a whole lot of, the 7 habits and all that kind of fun stuff. I'm not really that kind of guy. I'm more, I'm interested in how other leaders have done things. So I read a lot of biographies. I will say this. There's a book that everyone in EM should read. It's called Unthinkable. It's by Amanda Ripley. It talks to more about some of the reasons why people make decisions they do when they're faced with a high leverage situation. So she frames it under, some forms of disaster and those kinds of things. But really, leadership is about a high leverage, high intensity situation. Like, you have to make a call and you have to have confidence in doing that. And you've got to have confidence in building your people. So from a leadership perspective, I would say figure out who you are as a leader. Identify leaders who you've always enjoyed. Identify the qualities that you like in those leaders and figure out if that's something you want to emulate or don't, and then figure out how you get there. There's a lot of books out there on different ways to give you tools to do those kinds of things. But if you don't know who you are as a leader or what kind of leader you want to be, you're just going to bounce around from book to book.
Makes sense. Another follow-up question I have. Are there any conferences or organizations that kind of deal with like Spanish speaking individuals? Because I'm thinking, someone like myself that speaks Spanish and English. Is there anything on maybe like Latin American countries that our domestic agencies collaborate with that allow individuals that are bilingual to maybe step into those avenues? So I'm just thinking, like, as far as networking and that's all concerned, when we want to like expand that into the international community, what would you suggest to go through?
So there's a couple of options. The first is embassies are always an option, and the best way I can sort of describe, so how you get plugged into those is you go to where they are, just like anything. So you go to more international parts of the state, right? So your South Florida, your Tampa, your Jacksonville to a smaller degree, your Orlando, your Orange County areas. You go where those cultures already are, because that's where those support services are gonna be sort of concentrated, and then you move out. And then one of the things that I think people often overlook and undervalue when we talk about how we build out to different cultures in our community is, I promise you, somewhere where you live has a community group that is servicing whatever culture you're trying to reach. So if you're looking for a Hispanic or Latin American association, I bet you've got a culture club, I bet you've got a community center or a civic group that's out there servicing that community. I bet you there are church groups out there that are doing those kinds of things. And identifying that sort of hidden, often overlooked cultural support community is really, really important. One of the things that we worked very hard on in Brevard during COVID, understanding the reasonable distrust that Black and brown communities are going to have when it comes to vaccinations. They're not listening to me, and if I tell them it's safe, they don't care. They don't know me. Well, some of them do, but not everybody knows me. But who they do know? They know their ministers. They know their community leaders. So partnering with them and actually going to their churches to speak to their congregation, or going to their community groups to speak, and not just I'm not the one doing the talking. It's the preacher, it's the civic leader who's up there talking, and we're just providing hey, this is where the vaccine's going to be, this is the groups we're going to do, and we're going to work straight with your people so that we don't overlook folks, so that people have as much equitable access as we can get in there, and focusing on really going where people live and operate and utilizing the services they depend on day to day. It's a very, very common mistake in government to think that we have to come in and fix every problem, and that there is no existing infrastructure in that community to do things the only way we've ever been taught. And apparently, if there's only one way we've ever been taught, that's the only way to do it. So we'll go in and we'll make our round pegs fit in their square hole. And that's not how you do things. You go into a community, you figure out what resources they have, and then you figure out how you assist them with the mechanisms you're used to. And I'll give you an example. So after Hurricane Michael, I went to Calhoun County, which is a very small county. It's got about 12,000 people in it. It's very rural, not a lot of infrastructure. In Brevard, we have a very robust recovery system. We have 600,000 people. I've got pavement for days. I have a lot of groups I can work with. I can work with church groups. I can set up these recovery centers where we can hand out food and water and connect them to support services. We didn't have any of that in Calhoun. So I could have spent all my time looking for an empty parking lot somewhere or a civic center. Or what we chose to do was, we found small food pantries and then built existing food pantries by taking churches and getting them containers from like a container ship, one of the giant container things that you would see on a big ship as it moves around and those giant metal things, and using that as a drop-in food pantry where we dropped it next to the church and we supplied it, and then they handed out food to the residents. They vetted people to make sure that yes, indeed, they were in need. They took care of all of that stuff. So it really was community helping community, neighbor helping neighbor. All we did was find a different way to get them the commodity. And so that's a really long way for me to say, I promise you, you've got a group in your community who is servicing the people you're interested and can use more help, and specifically your skill set. You just have to connect with them. And that usually starts by picking up the phone and saying, hi, I'm a complete stranger. I read about you. I was referred to you. I saw you on the internet, and I'd like to get more involved. And if you take that big leap, I promise you, they'll leap back.
Cool. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for all this insight. Oh, this is excellent. Sam Gelibert asked what leaders did/do you aspire to emulate and why in the chat.
Sure. I'll talk about, I mean, I've been fortunate enough, I think like lots of people, to be impacted by multiple leaders. But for me, professionally and personally, one of the gentlemen who had the most impacts on my life was Bob Lay. He's an older EM director who passed away about, it's getting to be about 9 years now. But he was the first EM director who I worked for. He was the first EM director who took a chance on me when I wanted, as a volunteer to help me get into this field. And Bob was an amazing leader in that he was very direct. He told you what he thought. He told you what was going on. But he also worked to make sure that you knew he was interested and invested in you both personally and professionally. And when you were screwing up, he would tell you. And when you were doing well, he would tell you. And kept more things in his head than I can act. I don't know how anybody does. But that's what I have. That's for me, the leader I try to work on and the director I try to emulate is I want to be someone who my people know that I care about them, because I do genuinely care about them. And that I'm invested in not just the work they're doing for us as a team, but their professional and personal growth as they progress through life, that I want to see them succeed and that they actually trust and believe that those things are accurate for me and believe the same things for me as well. He was a big influence on my life and career, and again, who I try to make sure we continue to pass it on. It's one of the reasons why I get involved and speak at these kinds of things, because people take chances on you, and the way to do that is to pay it forward.
Cool. Yeah, I see Kyle said in the chat, by the way, I'm afraid I have to leave early, but wanted to say thank you for speaking tonight. Appreciate you clarifying the changes of communication to me. Thank you again. And yeah, we do thank you.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, would anyone else like to ask anything, whether it be about EM in general, career, FEPA, totally open the floor. Don't ever feel like anything is too specific. Don't be shy if you want to unmute yourself, and I'll ask, I guess, one more time if anyone wants to ask anything. Okay, well, I will ask something, I guess, to close out the Q&A. Trying to figure out how I want to word this properly. I mean, I guess kind of an almost generic question, but still valuable, especially after all this COVID stuff and FEPA not being able to, meet in person for a while, and now we're doing this new town hall model at mid-year. Where do you see FEPA going in the future? Even past your presidency. I mean, I'm sure it's probably changed forever a bit because of COVID.
I mean, it's going to sound like a layup and maybe a little bit of a lame answer, but I think our future is in our people and in our next leaders. And it's one of the reasons why I'm a big believer in our mentorship program. It's one of the reasons I'm a big believer in continuing to find ways to identify new passionate people. I don't know where we're going to be as a field in 5 years or 10 years. Those things are hard to sort of forecast, and I don't do those kinds of things. But so long as we've got strong people who are passionate about what it is we do as a community, we're going to be where we need to be, because those folks are going to drive us there. And that, I mean, again, I know it's a bit of a lame answer, but I really do genuinely believe that if we have good people involved and we're listening to our membership, we'll be fine whatever we are.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's so important. So important to listen. I mean, I remember like Professor Rob McDaniel teaching in his class leadership and communications and emergency management, the importance of empathy, right? And obviously like a part of empathy, whether that's like, expressing that toward the public in the wake of a disaster, or your own membership in your own organization, your own community, that they might have some grievances, they might have things they want addressed. Such an important part of empathy is listening. So you know what you need to be empathetic about, and obviously listening can help with constructive feedback, constructive changes, and having an organization that is actually reflective of the wants and needs of its membership. So definitely. So, well, one more time, I will throw it out there. If anyone wants to ask anything, I'll give it a moment. Okay. Well, I will say briefly, I encourage you all to attend the FEPA mid-year conference. It's going to be an excellent time of fellowship and learning from so many seasoned professionals in EM in Florida. It's August 4th through 6th in Crystal River, Florida. We're going to send out the registration info about that, FEPA membership info, things like that. And I will let John say a final word if you would like to.
Sure. You plugged FEPA, so I appreciate you doing that. And we're always happy as an association to see new faces, to find opportunities for people to get involved. I would encourage all of you, as you sort of work through your EM path, to know that it will probably be different than what you think it is. You will probably end up in a different place than you originally envisioned, but just to trust the process. It works well for those who are really dedicated and passionate. And for those that it doesn't work well for, I think it shows that maybe it's a different, it's time to find a different path out and into something else. So there's a lot of opportunities here. Stick with it. If there's anything we can do from the association standpoint, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Our executive director, Eve, is always available, and we try to be as accessible as we can. And thank you guys for your time. Tell Rob and Dave I said hello.
Oh, I definitely will.
Also, as a quick plug, I assume a lot of you, some of you are in Tallahassee.
Yeah, I think a lot of us are.
All right. In addition to Rob and Dave, you have Kurt Summerhoff as your actual EM director for your campus.
I worked with Kurt for most of from February of last year to August, and yeah, Kurt's great.
Yeah, Kurt's amazing. If you haven't had a chance to meet him, please stop by the campus and tell him hello. He is one of those people who helped influence me in what I grew up to become, and still figuring that out. So that's a great resource for you guys that you have there locally, in addition to Rob and Dave.
John,
thanks.
John, one more question. So I'm looking to join FEPA, but what advice would you give me once I'm in the association?
Find a committee, find a topic you're passionate about, and get involved with that committee.
Got you.
Yeah, like Carla Juarez helped me join the higher education working group. So yeah, I'm sure she and other people will help you, Fabian, join something that you can be a part of and learn and contribute. And we'll definitely send lots of info about that. And I will tell David and Rob and Kurt hello, and I'm sure they'll appreciate hearing that. So round of applause for John, our speaker. Thank you once again.
Thank you guys for having me tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, well, have a good night, guys.
Yeah, you too. Good night.